let's start with metabolic damage, okay? Metabolic damage. This is big. I would say that 99% of clients that I see, virtually all, come to me as undereaters. So think about that for a second. If you think you're not an undereater, odds are you probably are. Think about that. I'm going to drink more today. I was parched yesterday. I didn't drink enough, so I'm going to keep drinking. So I'm going to take you through right now. Let's go back to our outline yesterday with diet, right? Calories are number one, then macros, and then quality, and then timing and supplements. So calories being number one, first we need to start with how many calories should you be eating? Let's start with that. And so what I'd like you to do is while you're listening to this, go ahead and get your phone out or get on your computer or pause this video, do this, and then hit play again once you've done the steps. We're going to start calculating calories for how much you should be eating based on height, weight, age, sex, activity level, and goals. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open my Safari here on my phone, and I'm going to go to Google, and I'm going to search for BMR Calculator. BMR Calculator. All right, so looking here, the first bullet point that I've got under metabolic damage is we need to calculate BMR first, and then total daily energy expenditure, TDEE, and then we're going to set the calorie goal. So let's start with BMR, not to be confused with BMI. BMI is body mass index. Body mass index is a worthless number that should be thrown into the fucking trash. All right. Body mass index does not take into account composition, because if I'm in a build cycle, and since I'm very lean, if I'm in a build cycle and I weigh, let's say 135, even 140, if I'm lucky, at that age and height and weight, I would be considered in the high end of normal to overweight because of just my weight, height, and age and sex, not taking into account composition, right? So if you're looking at me, it's actually just pure muscle, right? So BMI, body mass index, does not take into account composition. It's a garbage number. I will fight anybody that thinks otherwise, okay? So unfortunately, when your doctor tells you that BMI is something useful, no real personal trainer worth their weight in gold will go off of BMI, all right? Keep that in mind. BMI is garbage. BMR, though, is really important. So BMR stands for base metabolic rate. Okay, so get your phone or your web browser open, and let's go to BMR Calculator. And I like this one. It's bmicalculator.net. Looks like this. And so basically, we're going to plug in your age, height, weight, and sex, and go ahead and plug that in. Okay, I'm not going to do it on here, but while you're doing that, go ahead and plug it in. I'm going to get a drink. So you're going to calculate your BMR. What BMR means, it's the number of calories that your body burns every day at rest. Okay, so it's the number of calories that your body takes for basic cardiovascular functioning, basic brain functioning, basic digestive functioning. Think of it as if you were awake but laying in bed all day not moving a muscle. That's your BMR. And that's our starting point for looking at how many calories you need. So let's just pretend that based on my age, height, weight, and sex, that BMR comes out around 1,400. Okay, we're just going to use easy math. And so then, of course, you're doing more than just laying in bed all day not moving. You're getting up, you're doing exercise, you're doing errands, you're going to the store, you're playing with your kids, or so on and so forth. You're doing a lot more than not moving. So we need a multiplier that reflects all the movement that you're doing. And so if you are a trainer yourself and you're watching this, or you're a nutritionist, right, we're not going to get into NEAT and all the different kinds of movement that generate activity. Okay, that's a little bit beyond the scope of this discussion. We can do that in one-on-one sessions. But basically, skipping all that, we're going to go to something called the Harris-Benedict equation. And so I'm going to go down here, click on Harris-Benedict equation just a little bit below that calculation. And it'll pull up a table that looks like this. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see. Oh, let me move it that way. Okay, there it is. Right, so it basically gives you multipliers from sedentary all the way up to very active, from about 1.2 to 1.7. And so pick from there the multiplier that reflects your activity level and just guess. You don't need to be painstakingly precise or perfect. We're going to come back to that word. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be. This is going to be kind of a moving target. That's what the diet and the calories really are. So just get in the ballpark. Just estimate what you think your activity level might be. And my recommendation is to round down, right? So if your activity level says 1.72 on that table that I just showed you, round it down to 170. That's going to be your best bet. These numbers just tend to come in a little bit high for most people. If you're experienced and you've got a lot of muscle, if you're very fit, then those numbers could be rounded up. Like, for example, since I carry a lot of muscle, those numbers don't even touch my metabolism, right? I have to really round up and then maybe add some to get to my calorie burn, right? So this is where individual variance and having a trainer that knows your entire picture, your entire puzzle, can really help to be more specific. But for now, just guess. Okay, so let's just take easy math. Let's say most of you are around maybe 1.5, which is moderately to vigorously active. Okay, so if I take my BMR, which is 1400, and I multiply by 1.5, which is my activity level, that's going to put me at 2100 for my TDEE, total daily estimated expenditure. Okay, now remember, these are just estimates, these are just ranges. They're not going to be precise to the calorie, but we don't need to be precise to the calorie. We're going to challenge that as we keep working together and as we talk more today and tomorrow. So just get in the ballpark, okay? All right, so let's say that I've got my number now, it's 2100. Okay, what do I do with that? So if somebody wants to lose weight, if all other things are constant, and they rarely are, but for the sake of the example, go with me. If all other things are constant, we need to be taking in less than that 2100 most days to be creating what we call a caloric deficit. There's that word, the D word, deficit. Right, so we're going to be below 2100 to create a deficit. How much? That's the million-dollar question. A lot of people want results now. I try to challenge that. Anytime that I get somebody that wants to lose weight, I really strongly encourage the long game. In fact, I won't train somebody that wants to play the short game anymore. I just won't do it. The consequences are too high. And so how much of a deficit? I typically shoot for 10%, maybe 20% at the most. So if we're taking 2100 and we want to lose weight, we need to set a deficit. A 10% deficit would put us at about 1900. That's pretty healthy, that's pretty sustainable. You're going to feel that deficit, you're going to be slightly hungry, right? But you're not going to notice huge dips in your performance or huge dips in your energy, sleep disruptions, mood disruptions, all the stupid shit that comes with extreme caloric deficits. If you've yo-yo dieted and you've done some of those diets, you know what I'm talking about. So a 10% deficit puts you at 1900. That's going to be a nice, sustainable, long-term solution. That's where I would start somebody. If somebody wants to step on the gas a little bit more, we might, maybe in a really healthy individual that I really know their history, we might go to a 20% deficit, which will put you down to 1700. Okay, so that's a 400 calorie deficit per day. All right. So when you're setting your deficits, keep that in mind. Anything more than a 20% deficit is going to have consequences, either short term, like I said, on your mood, your performance, your relationships, your work, your sleep, etc. But long term is the metabolic damage, the adaptation, which we are going to get to very shortly. Okay, so set your deficits appropriately. 10% is good, 20% is probably the most that I'd recommend. Okay, now what about the opposite? A lot of people that I work with want to gain muscle, right? Or fuel for performance. Performance requires a caloric maintenance or a surplus. It requires it. If you're in a deficit, you're surely not going to be able to perform your best. Hopefully that just makes intuitive sense. If you're not giving your body enough fuel, how is it going to perform at its best? I can break that down more if you guys need me to. But okay, so if you want to gain muscle, similar rules, right? You need to be taking in more than what you're burning to add mass, okay? And this is what I'm constantly trying to do. I'm constantly trying, unless I'm doing Ironman or a very specific endurance venture, my body type loses muscle like that overnight. That's an exaggeration, but quickly, okay? So I'm always trying to get ahead of my fast metabolism and get myself into a surplus. So a 10% surplus is good, 20% is better. Anything more than that, the short-term discomfort might not be worth it. Ask somebody what it's like to be overeating and over full all the time. It's pretty unpleasant. So 10% rule, 20% rule with deficits and surpluses, that is a healthy range. That's what I recommend. Okay, so now what happens when somebody wants to lose weight and they hold a deficit for a really long time? This is the crux of metabolic damage. So we're going into that next, all right? If there are any questions on deficits and surpluses at a basic level, go ahead and drop them into the comments. It'll take me about 30 seconds to see them, but go ahead and drop them if you have any. No questions? Everybody good? Okay, so now let's go into metabolic damage. Remember, the vast majority of my clients come in to seeing me with this situation going on. So if you think this isn't you, think again, okay, and listen very carefully. So metabolic damage is essentially too big of a deficit, too big for too long, right? Too big of a deficit for too long. Remember yesterday we said deficit is damage, okay? In the short term, sure, if you're in a healthy deficit range, if you're in that, let's say you're even in that 10% range, you're like, well, Tia, you recommended that 10% range. Is that damaging? Is it doing more harm than good? If we structure your macronutrients and your activity correctly, I'm going to go really fast over this, but see if you can stay with me. You're taking in low carbohydrates. That's the oldest trick in the book for weight loss. Not extremely low, right? But you're taking in low to moderate carbohydrates, and we're keeping your cardio in the aerobic fat burning zone. And so you're burning body fat for fuel in the presence of that deficit. That's how a healthy deficit works, right? It's not like your body has to come up with the shortage. The shortage doesn't go somewhere. It comes from burning stored body fat through the manipulation of the entire dietary puzzle. Low carbohydrates, aerobic cardio in the fat burning zone. We're burning body fat for fuel to make up that deficit at a slight number, right? If we're in a slight deficit for a short amount of time, okay? So a healthy deficit, there is no cost really to it. That's why it's healthy, right? So what if the deficit is too big though? What if you go beyond that 20%? Or what if you try to cut for 6 months or a year or a couple of years? Let's use our old example here. Let's pretend that my BMR is 1400 and my TDEE is 2100. Okay, so let's keep those numbers in mind and let's paint some pictures here. Let's say I come in and I'm not super experienced and I want to really lose weight. I want to lose it fast. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go aggressive and I'm going to go for that 20%. You know what? Why not even 25% of a deficit? Because I can handle it and I know how to suffer. And you just bite off more than you can chew because you want it and you want it now, short term. Impatience is going to get you in trouble. Keep that in mind. So let's say you cut off 25% off of your total daily energy expenditure. And even if you don't know these numbers as you're doing these things, but you just end up restricting yourself beyond 20%, which is what most people do. They don't really have the numbers in mind. So let's say you're coming in at 1,600 calories. Okay, that deficit is pretty big. You may not be able to make that up with utilizing stored body fat as fuel, and or you may not be structuring the rest of your program in a meticulous enough way where your body is using that stored body fat for fuel. Okay, you're just in a deficit. There's not enough calories going in to cover your energy expenditure. Okay, when we say it this way, it's going to make so much sense to you guys, but everybody does this. Okay, so you're at a shortage of calories. You're at a deficit of calories. You're not using stored body fat as fuel. What's happening to those extra 500 calories that you've cut off that your body is needing to complete the processes that it needs to do, right? Because that 2,100 calories are energy. Your body runs on energy, right? And it needs that energy for all the processes that it does all day and all night. Cardiovascular functioning, brain functioning, nervous system functioning, endocrine functioning, digestion, etc. Okay, recovery, sleep, everything runs on calories, okay? So if you're short 500, what's happening to those 500 calories of processes that are not getting the fuel that they need? To a certain extent, they are going to get cut. In the short term, your body's going to get away with that, but think about the catastrophe of that long term, okay? If your body is not doing all the processes that it needs to do for a long period of time, doesn't that sound like a disaster to you? It sounds like a breakdown coming, a train wreck coming down the tracks. So the unfortunate reality is it doesn't hit until way after it's too late. Okay, so let's go back to that example. Person 1 comes in, they hit 1,600 calories. The total daily energy expenditure is actually 2,100. Maybe they're being imprecise with what they're doing with their activity, so they're not using just stored fat as body fuel. Okay, so those 500 calories that are missing, some processes are getting cut. And what's happening is the body says, okay, we're not getting enough to do all the processes that we need. We're not getting enough fuel. So we better figure out how to cut those processes to run now at 1,600. So it adapts, right? So your metabolism now learns that 1,600 is the input, and it learns to run at that number, okay? And now it's back to, so to speak, normal or homeostasis, back at 1,600. Okay, so then that's called a plateau, right? So what you see on the outside is, well, I've been working really hard and I've been like starving myself, but it worked for a little bit, but it's not working anymore, so I better just drop it lower or do more cardio or dig myself even further in. And so you double your resolve and you work harder and you eat less, and now you're at 1,300 calories or something like that. I see this too much with people, too much. And so now you're at 1,300 calories, and now you're below your BMR, right? If this is not disturbing you, if this is not the way that we're saying this now, if this is not like ringing alarms in your head, then go back and rewatch, right? Like you're not hitting at 1,300 the basic number of calories that your body needs with no movement, and you're putting in hours of movement on top of that. So now what's happening with that 800 calorie deficit? More processes are getting cut. More processes are not getting done. Okay, so you can tell the urgency of my tone is picking up here. This is a catastrophe, because what shows up, what happens is years down the road, this metabolic damage shows up as gastrointestinal problems, nerve system problems, mystery issues that seemingly have no cause, but it's because your body's breaking down because you didn't put enough fuel in it for so many years. That's the problem. That's metabolic damage. Okay, deficit is damage. In the short term, it is acceptable to get results, but you cannot hold it for too long because your body will break down. I don't know how to say it more urgently. Okay, it's really critical that you do not stay in deficit for too long. Now, I don't mean to scare you out of a deficit. If you do it in a healthy way and the rest of your program is in place, it's what most people do for some part of the year. But when you take it too far for too long without paying attention to all the other things that go into it, you get one body and you're messing it up with the restrictive dieting. Okay, if there are any questions on that, please let me know. Okay, and so let's go back to see what else do I have on metabolic damage. So oftentimes with metabolic damage, what we see is people might even know this. People might have been my clients and hear this talk over and over and over, but they still persist and not eating enough. And so that's what we're going to keep going through today. That comes from issues of self-worth, self-esteem, disordered eating, other mental health issues, perfectionism. So people that even know all this information but still persist, it's pretty common. Then it's just a symptom of a deeper cause. Okay, so metabolic damage might be superficial. It might just be having the wrong information. If it is, awesome, make the change. If it's not, if it still feels like it's deeper, or if you can hear the logic of it but still not want to make the change, then the issue is something deeper, and we're going to explore that today. So, okay, metabolic damage, there it is. I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going. Now, how do we get out of metabolic damage? This is really key. So I just call it reverse dieting or a metabolic reset. That a lot of people in the industry call it that, but metabolic reset's what I typically go with. So here's how we reverse out. First, you have to realize that you might have to go backwards to go forward. And this is what a lot of people cannot handle. With fitness, somewhere along the way, people have learned that instant gratification is real. It's not. My company's slogan is work harder for a reason. This is hard work. Physical work is hard work. Mental and emotional work, I would say, is even harder work. It's all related. So if you think that you can get out of metabolic damage quickly, then you have to check your expectations. This could take a while. The longer that you've been in an adapted state, in a damaged state metabolically, the longer it will take to get out of it. I've got some people that have been in this state for 10 or 20 years. You're not going to get out of it in even 1 year. Okay? That might be enough time to get out of it by that point, right? But think of it that way. The further in that you've dug yourself, the longer that it's going to take to get out. It's not a 1-for-1. It's not going to take 20 years to get out of it, but be patient with your body, right? It's been through a lot. Really important. So you might go backwards to go forward. What I mean by that is a lot of people, when they start a metabolic reset, typically the ones that have been in it for longer, you might gain up to 5 pounds as we're reversing your calories back up. It's temporary, and it will go back, okay? It's just your body's way of saying, well, we've been running at 1,300 and now you're putting in 1,500. That feels like a surplus, right? If you can understand the logic of it, then it might help to quell some of the discomfort, okay? But you might have to go backwards to go forward. That up to 5 pounds might be temporary, and might not even happen, right? What I mean by the might is some people, if they haven't been in a damaged state for very long, as soon as the calories go up, they actually start losing weight right away. That's awesome. That's the best case scenario. They're like, I'm eating more, but I'm losing right away. What's happening? This is what's happening. Your body's finally getting what it needs. And so it's able to run more efficiently, so you're losing weight. So that's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is up to 5 pounds. What's 5 pounds? Hopefully that doesn't throw you for a loop. If it does, we're going to talk about that when we get to the numbers game. Okay, so what we do is basically we get your calories up to 90% of your total daily energy expenditure. And we go up 10% at a time. So if you're starting at 1,300, up 10% every 2 weeks is going to put you up to about 1,450. 2 weeks, hold it. If you get it, then go up to 1,600. Hold it for 2 weeks. If you get it, go up to 1,750. 90% of 2,100 is what, 2,000? 1,950, somewhere around there. So the goal is to go up from where you are. Again, this is where the food log is really important. People that are avoiding the food log, please just stop it. Stop avoiding the food log. We have to know where you're at. And so we start with awareness of where you are. Go up 10% every 2 weeks as long as you're handling it okay. Go up to 90% of your TDEE. And then hold it there as long as you can. Again, be patient. The number one derailer of things for people in fitness is impatience. It takes time. It takes a while. And so up to 90%, hold it there for as long as you can. At least a month or two or a couple. 6 months would be better. The longer that you've been in a damaged state, the longer you gotta hold it. Okay, so that's the mindfuck of the metabolic damage, is you have to eat more to lose more. And I've got plenty of clients that are on this call right now and that are in this group that have gone through this. It is the truth. If you've not been able to lose weight by restricting lower and lower and lower, with activity going higher and higher and higher, this is the problem. Metabolic damage, I see it all the time. Almost all my clients come in with it, okay? I don't have anything else on metabolic damage. I'm ready to switch topics. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop them. Let me hydrate, and we'll go to our next topic.